My name is Clara. I'm a 32-year-old architect living in Seattle. And the day I finally got the keys to my very first house, my mother's voice went so cold, you would have thought I'd stolen something precious from her. I was standing in the empty kitchen of my new place on Pine Street holding those keys in my hand when my phone started ringing off the hook. 12 missed calls from my mom. 12. I thought maybe she was hurt that I hadn't told her sooner. I honestly thought she was going to cry happy tears, and that my dad would want to check if the roof was holding up. But I was wrong about all of it. About 3 weeks later, a 6-year-old sitting at my kitchen counter blurted out the whole truth. And compared to what my family did after that, changing the locks on my house feels like child's play. Because my parents weren't angry about what I had bought. They were furious about what my brother was supposed to do with it. Let me back up a bit. Because you need to understand where I stood in the family before all of this went down. For the past 8 years, I've worked as an architect at a large firm here in Seattle. For 6 of those 8 years, I lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment where the windows constantly let in the roar of street traffic. I always made my coffee at home. I drove a beat-up old car, and I quietly saved my money every single month. I did it religiously, like a prayer, without breathing a word to anyone. In my family, I was the fixer. I was the one who handled everything. Every year, I did my parents' tax returns. When my aunt needed help filling out her medical forms, she called me. Whenever a letter arrived with a government seal on it, it somehow found its way to my kitchen table. My older brother Jason always joked that Clara was the family's free accountant, free lawyer, and free advisor. Everyone would laugh, and I'd laugh along too because that's just what I did. I laughed, and I took care of it. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about being the reliable one. In my family, being reliable wasn't a compliment. It was a job, one you were expected to do no matter what, with no salary, no vacation days, and absolutely no option to quit. You're handed the position in childhood, and you spend the rest of your life paying for it. My whole life, I thought carrying that burden was just how they showed their love. I balanced everyone's books and told myself that doing so meant I belonged. Standing in that empty kitchen, looking at those 12 missed calls, I had no idea my job description was about to expand. Because apparently, being reliable now included providing real estate. I just hadn't read that part of the contract yet. Nobody had bothered to show it to me. They had only discussed it with each other. Here's a quick look at the dynamic inside my family. My parents own an old 3-bedroom house just outside Seattle, about 20 minutes away from my new place. My dad is a retired engineer who doesn't speak unless something needs fixing. My mom works part-time at a local community center, where she does less helping and more bossing people around. About 2.5 years ago, my brother Jason's tech startup completely tanked. He ran the business for 5 years and then everything fell apart, slowly at first, and then all at once. Investors pulled out, and the bank foreclosed on his house. For the last year and a half, Jason, his wife Sarah, and their 2 kids, 8-year-old Liam and 6-year-old Emma, have been living at my parents' house. That's 6 people crammed into a house built for 4. I could see how much it was wearing all of them down. I never said a single word against it. Last year, I bought all the kids' back-to-school supplies. I paid for Liam's summer camp and told Sarah I'd gotten a corporate gift card, which was a total lie, but she never questioned it. I'd constantly drop by with groceries and household supplies, casually claiming I was just in the neighborhood. I did what I had always done. I quietly solved everyone's problems from the sidelines so nobody would have to swallow their pride and ask for help. But that winter, my mom started asking me a weird question. She'd wait until we were alone drying dishes, and she'd ask it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. "Have you looked at any bigger houses, Clara?" A bigger house? I lived alone in a tiny apartment. I remember thinking it was such an odd phrase for her to keep dwelling on. But it wasn't odd, it was a calculated plan. I need to tell you a story from my childhood, because everything that happened this year actually started 25 years ago. When I was 12, I used to babysit for two families in our neighborhood. I made $4 an hour, which felt like an absolute fortune back then. I kept the cash stashed away in an old shoebox under a sweater in my closet. I was saving up for a blue bicycle I'd seen in the window of the local hardware store. I counted that money every day, the way other kids read comic books. One Saturday in March, the water heater at my parents' house broke down, during the exact same week my dad's salary had been cut. I came home from school on Monday, reached into my closet, and realized the shoebox felt incredibly light. No one had even asked me. My mom sat me down at the kitchen table, placed her hand over mine, and explained that families always support each other, and she knew I would understand. Then she said the words that defined the rest of my life. She looked at my dad and my aunt and said, "Clara is sensible. Clara always understands." And everyone looked at me and smiled. I remember exactly how earning that smile made me feel. I felt like I had been chosen. I felt like my name was engraved on a trophy. So, I smiled back and said, "The water heater was more important." I never got that blue bike. But I learned exactly what my family was offering me. The price of their affection was my understanding. Being useful was the rent I paid to keep my place in the family. I spent the next 25 years playing the girl who understands everything. I understood at 15, I understood at 25, I understood at 30. I kept understanding until my understanding became the only thing anyone ever needed me for. My new house on Pine Street was the very first thing in my life I refused to hand over, and my family treated that refusal like a felony. I bought my house in secret, and I want to be completely honest about why. 3 years ago, I bought a car. A totally normal, sensible car. The most boring purchase on earth. I made the mistake of mentioning at Sunday dinner that I was looking at a specific model. My family instantly turned it into a massive debate. My dad had strong opinions about the transmission. My aunt knew a guy who could get a cheap deal. My mom wanted me to wait until the spring for a reason she never bothered to explain. By the end of it, I was so exhausted I almost bought the exact car my mom wanted, in a color I absolutely hated. So, when I started house hunting last winter, I kept my mouth shut. And the longer I looked, the weirder my mom's hints became. She kept bringing up one specific property, a 4-bedroom house on Oak Street. "The school district there is fantastic," she'd say. "Houses like that really hold their value. You need a place like that for a growing family." I had never once told her I was looking to buy. I remember feeling a cold, uneasy knot in my chest every time Oak Street was mentioned. It felt like hearing your own name in a conversation you aren't a part of. I didn't have the words for it then. All I knew was that I wanted a set of keys that belonged only to me, and a deed with only one name on it. In February, I found a beautiful little house on Pine Street, 2 bedrooms, a front porch with a tiny flight of stairs, and a blue ceramic bowl the previous owners had left on the kitchen counter. It cost $285,000. I put down $57,000 up front. 8 years of blood, sweat, and tears gone in a single wire transfer. My real estate agent asked if my family wanted to see the place before closing. I told her, "My family tours things by voting on whether I deserve them. Doing the paperwork to buy a house takes 40 minutes. It would take my family 4 months to make me regret holding the pen." Closing day was the first Friday in March. I signed on the dotted line, shook hands, drove to Pine Street, and stood in my very own kitchen with my very own keys. Then, I did what I'd been dreaming of doing for months. I sent a photo of the keys to the family group chat with a single line. "Surprise, I bought a house." I set the phone on the counter and finally breathed a sigh of relief. When I picked the phone back up, I had 12 missed calls. My parents' landline, my mom's cell, my mom's cell again, my mom's cell again. Not a single text saying congratulations. Absolute radio silence from Jason. I stood in my empty kitchen and called them back. My mom picked up before the first ring even finished. The silence on the other end was so heavy I had to say hello twice. Then my mother spoke. You did this without asking us. She didn't ask where it was or how much it cost. She didn't ask, "Are you happy, honey?" Without asking us, as if I had sold off a company behind the board of directors' backs. I honestly laughed because I thought she had to be half joking. Mom, I'm 32. It's a tiny 2-bedroom house. It's not a corporate merger. My dad was on speakerphone. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say a word, which is my dad's native language. My mom's voice didn't get louder. It got lower and dangerously quiet. And anyone in my family will tell you that is the ultimate red flag. You have no idea what you've done, she said. And then she hung up on me. I stood there, clutching my phone in a new house that still smelled like someone else's paint. I'd spent 32 years studying my mother's anger, and it always took different shapes. Hurt looked one way, worry looked another. But this wasn't either of those. This was the sound of something breaking that I couldn't see. A plan, as it turned out. Their plan. By Sunday, the entire family knew. If you're from a small town, you know exactly what I mean. First came a text from my aunt. Call your mother. She is completely shattered. Shattered? Over a small house? Then my mom's cousin called to lecture me that family is the only thing that stays with you after you die, which was rich coming from a woman who once sued her own brother over a lawnmower. After that, 2 ladies from my mom's church group sent me virtually identical messages about how blessed I was and how blessings are meant to be shared. I want you to notice something I picked up on later. Almost identical phrasing. The exact same words kept coming out of different people's mouths. Share your blessings. Family sticks together. Your poor mother. When 5 different people call you selfish using the exact same vocabulary, someone wrote the script. At the time, I just felt like I was losing my mind. I had bought a house with my own money, in my own city, 20 minutes away from my parents, and my family was acting like I'd fled the country under a fake passport. But the message that actually kept me up at night wasn't from an aunt. It was from my brother. Jason hadn't said a word for 2 days. No congratulations, no excitement, none of his usual spam of emojis. Then, on Sunday night, my phone buzzed once. That's all he wrote. I must have read it 30 times. So this is it then. It sounded like someone standing at the end of the road. Someone watching a door slam in their face. But I hadn't closed a door on anyone. I had just opened my first one. I typed back, "What does that mean, Jason?" And watched the typing bubbles appear and disappear. Appear and disappear. Like someone pacing anxiously behind a pane of glass. No reply ever came. Everyone in my family was mourning at the exact same funeral, and I was the only one who hadn't seen the body. 3 weeks after I closed on the house, my mom summoned me for a Sunday family dinner. Summoned is the right word, because her text read like a court subpoena. I went. Because 25 years of conditioning doesn't just wash away in 2 weeks. The atmosphere at the dining table was freezing and tense. My dad talked about the weather twice. Jason refused to meet my eyes. He just kept cutting Emma's food into smaller and smaller pieces, long after she had stopped eating. Sarah kept repeating that the roast was amazing, which was more than she usually spoke around my parents on a normal day. Every conversation died a sudden death in the middle of the room, as if the whole table was waiting for a cue no one wanted to give. Then, during dessert, my mom put her spoon down and said to no one in particular, "That 4-bedroom house on Oak Street is still on the market, you know. Great school district." A very specific kind of silence fell over the room. It wasn't the silence of surprise. It was the silence of getting caught. I looked up. Mom, how do you know it's still on the market? She smoothed out the tablecloth. People talk, Clara. Here is what you need to understand. I had never, not even once, told my mother I was house hunting. Not the Oak Street house, not any house. Yet, she knew it was still available, meaning someone had been keeping a close eye on it. Jason stared into his coffee mug like it owed him money. My dad suddenly became incredibly fascinated by his napkin, and then Emma, my 6-year-old niece, abandoned her melting ice cream and asked with the pure, unshakable confidence of a third grader. Auntie Clara, is your new house the one where we're— Emma! Jason snapped. He just barked her name, fast and vicious, like a bear trap snapping shut. Emma froze. Suddenly, the whole table erupted into loud, meaningless chatter. I just sat there, my spoon suspended in midair. Finally, I was absolutely certain of one thing. Every single person in that room knew something I didn't. And that very night, I got my answer from the only person in my family who still told the truth. After dinner, I was washing dishes when Jake climbed onto the kitchen stool next to me, swinging his legs, holding his bowl of melting ice cream. He's a kid who pays attention to things, and in the most casual tone, the way you talk about a school field trip, he said, "Grandma said when you get the new house, me and Emma get the big bedroom, and we're gonna live there as long as Mom and Dad want to." My hands stopped moving in the dishwater. I kept my voice very soft. "The new house? Your house?" Liam spoke slowly, probably thinking I was just a bit dense. "Yeah, when you buy the big house. Mom and Grandma talk about it every day. Since before Christmas." Since before Christmas. It was the end of March. I dried my hands, walked straight into the living room, and asked the question out loud in front of everyone. I had learned the hard way that my family did its most dangerous work in the shadows. Were Jason and Sarah planning to move into my house? Nobody asked. What? Nobody looked confused. And that was all the answer I needed. Jason squeezed his eyes shut. Sarah stared at the carpet like she was preparing for an exam on it. My dad looked at my mom. And my mom? My mom looked relieved. I swear to God, she looked genuinely relieved, like a woman finally given permission to drop a heavy suitcase. "You were never supposed to find out from Emma or Liam," she said. And then it all spilled out, perfectly rehearsed, like a script. Which is exactly what it was. A master plan. I was supposed to buy the 4-bedroom house on Oak Street, the one my mom had been pushing me toward for months. Jason, Sarah, and the kids were going to move in with me. Just for a few years, that's all. Family, helping family. Everyone had discussed it. Everyone had agreed. Everyone. Except me. I stood in my parents' living room and watched the rest of my life get dismantled by a rule book they had written for me. When I finally found my voice to ask, "How could you plan my life without asking me?" My mom looked genuinely bewildered. "What's yours belongs to the family, Clara. That's what family means." I said no in my parents' living room, and I want to tell you exactly how I did it, because I had practiced that word my entire life and never actually used it. I didn't scream. I didn't list 25 years of grievances. I simply said, "No. I'm sorry you made this plan without me, but my answer is no." For a split second, nobody moved. I don't think anyone in that room had ever heard me say no without wrapping it in 1,000 apologies first. Then, my mom recovered the way a chess grandmaster recovers, by making her next move. "Fine," she said, "then sell it. The Oak Street house is still on the market. Buy it, and this time we'll help you look. This time we'll help you." That one sentence told me exactly how they viewed the last 8 years of my hard work. My new home wasn't a home to them. It was a mistake, a wrongly checked box on a form, and out of the goodness of their hearts, the family was offering to help me fix my blunder. I said, "My house isn't a mistake. It is not for sale, and there are no vacancies." Jason finally spoke up from the couch, his voice quiet. "You only have 2 bedrooms, Clara. There are 4 of us." As if the math was the only issue. As if the only problem with hijacking my house was the square footage. No one in that room ever asked the obvious question. Like a normal human being, I kept waiting for the simplest question of all. "Clara, do you even want to live with 4 other people?" But nobody asked, because what I wanted had never been a line item in the family budget. I grabbed my coat and my keys and walked out. Driving back to Pine Street, I actually felt lighter, because I thought I had ended it. I thought no was the end of the conversation, but in my family, it was just a declaration of war. And this war started off incredibly polite, the way everything in my family does. In the first week of April, my aunt showed up on my porch with a sweet cake and a long lecture. She took a tour of my small house, calling it cute, with a tone dripping with condescension. Then she sat at my kitchen table and explained that family takes care of family. She reminded me that my grandmother's generation shared everything they had and said she just knew I would do the right thing once the shock wore off. Shock. My shock, apparently. The shock of being so selfish. She was just the first in a long line of visitors. Over the next 3 weeks, I received 2 more desserts, a lasagna, another cake, and a revolving door of guests who all seemed to be reading from the exact same script. A church friend of my mom's texted to say she was praying my heart would soften. My mom's cousin left a voicemail preaching that houses are temporary, but family is forever, which, as an architect, I can confidently say is completely backward. The house had a 30-year mortgage, and my family was currently treating me like a foreclosed property. But here is the detail that really got under my skin. Not a single one of them asked me a question about my life. No one asked how the house was. No one asked if I was happy. No one asked why a woman who saved for 8 years might want her own front door. Every conversation started with my obligation and ended with my selfishness. It was as if my actual existence was just a hallway they walked down to get to what they wanted. I stayed calm and polite. I put all the casseroles and cakes in the freezer. I told them, "I hear you." So many times the words lost all meaning. But at night, lying alone in bed, the ugly truth kept circling my mind. The church ladies, the cousin, my aunt, they all used the exact same phrases in the exact same order. Someone had drafted this narrative, and I knew exactly whose handwriting it was. Amidst all this, there was a moment I almost surrendered, and I want to be completely honest about it, because this part matters. In mid-April, I stopped by their house to drop off Emma's umbrella on my way home. I let myself in through the kitchen, just like always, and stood there for a minute, completely unnoticed, just watching. There was an old mattress leaning against the living room wall, folded up like a dirty secret. Liam's shoes were lined up on the stairs because there was literally no floor space left in the kids' room. Through the doorway, I could see Emma's tiny mattress pushed right up against my parents' bed. Sarah was cooking something on the stove, and even though she was only 31, that day, she looked 50. My mom was standing by the sink. When did her posture start to stoop like that? No one was putting on a show for me. No one even knew I was there. This was just their reality. 6 people breathing the same exhausted air, and it was hard to watch. I'm not made of stone. Standing in the kitchen I grew up in, an old machine geared up inside my chest. The same old machine of the girl who understands everything. I actually pulled out my phone. My real estate agent's number was on the screen. 1 call. Is the Oak Street house still available? How fast can I list my house? My thumb hovered over the dial button. And then, another part of my brain, the architect, thank God for her, asked a quiet question. Wait, why has my house never been brought up alongside other options? 6 people, an entire city, countless houses and rentals, dozens of avenues for assistance. Yet the family had routed every single path straight through my front door. I put my phone away, but my thumb remembered the feeling of almost making that call. So I did what I always do. I made a plan. If the problem was truly about housing, then housing problems have solutions. And I am very good at finding solutions. I spent a whole weekend on it. I found a list of 6 rental homes in Emma's school district, 3 of which were 3-bedroom houses. I built Jason and Sarah a budget spreadsheet using real numbers, outlining exactly how much they'd need every month and where they fell short. I even found a nonprofit organization that helps families get back on their feet after a business failure, and I offered financial help. Not vague, empty promises, actual cash to cover their application fees and their security deposits. I printed all the documents, put them in a neat folder, and went to my parents' house on a Tuesday evening. I swear to God, I honestly thought I was bringing them good news. Sarah opened the folder, and as she flipped through the pages, I watched her expression shift. It wasn't relief. She stared at my files like they were a prison sentence. "A spreadsheet," she said. "You made us a spreadsheet." "Sarah, it's a way out. These are 6 real apartments." "We don't need a spreadsheet, Clara." Her voice cracked down the middle. "We need family." And right there, that was the real issue. The entire war was hidden inside that one tiny word. I didn't fully understand it at the time. It took me another 2 months to really get it. I was trying to solve their problem, but their problem wasn't money or housing. I was their problem. Me, my house, my roof, me folding myself back into their herd. That was the actual plan. And by handing them a folder of apartments, I had rejected their plan while disguised in a helpful costume. Jason walked in that day, glanced at the folder, looked at me, and walked right back out without saying a word. At the time, I saw it as a massive insult. I was wrong about that, and it's one of the few things in this story I'm actually glad I was wrong about. The Saturday after the spreadsheet incident, my dad showed up alone at Pine Street. He didn't call ahead. I looked outside, and his beat-up truck was parked out front. My dad was standing on my porch with his toolbox, glaring at my broken steps as if they had insulted my mother. "Somebody's gonna break their neck on these stairs," he grunted. That was his entire greeting. He didn't mention the Oak Street house, or Jason, or our massive argument. He just fixed the stairs, cut the wood perfectly, drove each nail in with 2 clean strikes, while I stood on the porch with a coffee, handing him tools, which is our true love language. When he finished, he grabbed his toolbox and stared out at the lawn for a second. Then my dad, a man who never volunteers his feelings, said, "Your mother isn't wrong about everything, kiddo. She's just carrying a much heavier load than she lets on." I asked, "What kind of load, Dad?" And I watched him almost tell me the truth. I've replayed that moment in my head more times than I can count. His mouth opened, his jaw tensed. The truth made it all the way to his teeth. Then he tapped my new steps with his boot and said, "Make sure you get a coat of paint on these." And he drove home. I stood on my newly fortified porch and understood exactly one thing. There was a massive, devastating loss in my parents' life that I had been kept in the dark about. And my mother was wandering around in the dark, trying to balance the books all by herself. Do you know what the saddest part of that night was? It wasn't the fear that they had locked me out. I sat on my kitchen floor, literally on the floor, leaning against the cabinets, clutching the keys to my brand new locks with the paper tags still attached. And I cried for the first time since closing day. The tears weren't out of fear of being burglarized. I was crying because of what that new lock represented. At 32 years old, I was building walls to keep my own family out. Every ridge on those keys whispered the same thing. You were right not to trust them. And being right felt like swallowing a rock. I can't even describe how much that feeling broke me. But after all the tears, I finally calmed down and realized one thing. If they had broken my trust, I wasn't going to sit around and take it anymore. A home is never just a bedroom count. It is your peace, and no one has the right to steal that from you. I will always love my family, but from a distance. I have already paid my share of the rent. If you agree with what I did, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to Bookbite Studio, because we'll keep bringing you more heartbreaking, true stories just like this one.